Well, this is one of the reasons here that for Nithraid is basically because it's the import and export from Dumfries, because Dumfries was, the entire town and its commerce was built around the river. And people forget the White Sands, which they're talking about building a giant molehill to solve the flooding. But that actual fact was a beach at one time, and in days gone by, all the boats beached onto that beach and then came down with horses and carts and carried away the commerce. But they also brought in cattle, which were exported down to the more industrial towns like Whitehaven and Workington. And that was part of the commerce of town that built us. But the biggest import in this town was actually tobacco. That's what the wealth was made of. And that's why there's a Dumfries in Chesapeake Bay, because it was married with Dumfries. And they shipped across tobacco from there, and rum, of course, from Jamaica in the same route, because you've got one with the other. And it was then transported from Carthorne down the river, back down to Liverpool and to Bristol. And people think, that it was these towns that were the main, it was actually Dumfries was one of the main founders of the transatlantic route. And that's why Dumfries, and unfortunately, boats got bigger, so the river was no longer of any use. And there was a small village called Glasgow, which had quite a nice river, and everything moved to there. And Dumfries has wondered what to do ever since. So we want to try and publicise the river. Water is one of the biggest relaxing agents you can have. If people are under stress, they go back to a river, they go back to a burn, they go for a hot bath, or something like that. And it's the only place where there's space. I've just sailed right up the coast of Wales and into Polnackie. And it's one of these things, when you put on AIS that your port of destination is Polnackie, you get people asking, where the heck's that? And you have to explain to them, because they've never heard of it before. And Dumfries comes into the same category because people have forgotten it. The people of Dumfries have forgotten the maritime history. I mean, one time we had 3 major ironworks in Dumfries that manufactured ironwork, which was then exported all over the world. And sandstone as well was exported across. New York has got sandstone from Dumfries that's in its buildings, etc. And part of the Statue of Liberty actually has sandstone from Dumfries and sandstone from Annan. So we exported everything and anything, and everything that came and went came by sea. And nowadays, after that, it was the train, and now it's all roads. But we've got the biggest bypass in the world. We're an island. Everything should be coming from sea again. The pleasure of sailing up the River Nith is something long forgotten. And the harbours, etc. I couldn't believe a great number of years ago the state of decay and dereliction in the harbours of the River Nith, because they're absolutely beautiful harbours, built away in the past, connected to the commerce. And Mark and myself are members of the Ports of Dumfries Development Group, and we want to try and promote them and use them. But the main thing nowadays is leisure and pleasure. And it's to try and encourage the people of the area. We have these facilities, they can be used, it's fun, it's relaxation, it's not terribly expensive, and you can really enjoy the river the way it was intended to be used for a great many years. In fact, the last really busy time on the river was bringing in road rail from Workington, where it's manufactured and shipped all over the world. They brought it in by sea, and then they built the railway, and of course that made the river redundant commercially. And after that it was very, very little. There was odd cargoes of things like beans from Morocco, and things like that for the feeding stuff mills, but that was connected with agriculture. And nowadays it comes in by road. In fact, there's virtually no feeding stuff mills in Dumfries or the area now as they used to be, because they're all close to major ports, because it's all bigger ships and bulk carriers, etc., etc. We have this fantastic coastline that everybody seems to forget about. When you look at a map of Dumfries and Galloway's coastline, there's hardly a mile without something being called a port. It's absolutely incredible, because we have these, as I say, it's an unbelievable coastline with nooks and crannies and wee bays and coves. And coming up the coast there, one of my crew was looking at some of the caves and saying, in the past they actually took ships in there.
Wow.
Right into caves, because some of them are up to maybe, I think one of them about 400 metres long.
Wow.
And you could certainly take a small boat in, no problem at all. But in those days, men were bold and women even bolder, and they were the main people behind the economy. And in our area here, virtually everything was built on commerce or smuggling. Well, Dumfries, in many ways, when you think about it, it was one of the most powerful towns in the area. And that's why it was so important to invading armies and other things like that, because of its geographical situation and its rivers and its accessibility, because everything came by water, unless you walked. And also the fords in Dumfries, because that's why, you've got Castle-Dykes fortification, but immediately opposite in Trequia, earthworks. And where Dumfries Castle was, and immediately opposite in Sandside, earthworks. That's because there were two armed camps on both sides of the river, different lots of Vikings. And that's why we've got Torthorald and Tynald in Dumfries, the same as the Isle of Man. And why you've got all these other places down the estuary with Nesses, Southerness, Elverness, all the rest of these things, which are a different lot of Vikings. And they watched one another the whole time. And that's part of our history in Scotland. And Dumfries was a very, very important part of the history of Scotland that everybody seems to have forgotten about. Space, meeting interesting people. I sail a fairly big boat, big ship, and everywhere we go, we work on a complete open door principle. Anybody that wants to come on board are welcome to come on board. And you meet some amazing people. It's quite incredible. It's quite amazing the change in them, because they have to work as a team. They're dealing with the elements, they're working with a lot of power in sail, and they have to work with the elements and work with it, and that is important. And I've never come across any of the young people, because we take a lot of people with problems, and I've never come across any of them that didn't put it in their CV. And I've never come across an employer that didn't pick up on that fact, because it meant they're adaptable, they cope, and they listen to instructions. And that's very, very important to anybody taking on young people.